The end of 2022 came around and Tekken 7 was the only game I was playing. Moving into 2023, I was starting to understand what I was supposed to be doing, especially playing as Heihachi or Miguel. However, I was still unsure exactly how to continue learning other than watching other Tekken players show off their clips. I was stumped. A large part of this was everything being obvious to the larger community, and they didn't talk about the basic boring stuff that everyone knows, unless you actively searched for that, which I wasn't. Eventually, I had some outside things happen and my passion for Tekken fell by the wayside. That led to my love for Street Fighter 6, a game I would consider to be my real start as a fighting game player and YouTuber. This isn't to knock my Tekken 7 gameplay, but Street Fighter 6 was the first game I felt like I was really learning alongside the rest of the community. But I still didn't quite have a direction as to what to learn for the fighting games, as the game wasn't figured out since it had just been released. That, added onto the fact I was still a fairly new fighting game player, meant I was still new to learning the genre. Plus, while I'd had friends playing Tekken 7 with me, I could never really talk anyone into trying SF6, as to most people, it still feels quite inorganic to get into. Looking back now and knowing a lot more about fighting games, there's so much information coming at you from all angles. The hardest part about this is the question of, should you learn it all at once or focus on one skill at a time? This is a very hard question because if I am an example, I don't have the focus to only learn one thing at a time, and I have to learn a couple of things at least. So what can you do about this? A lot of gamers have a neurodivergence of some kind, so focusing on one thing is difficult for a lot of us. Sometimes that makes competitive games like shooters or fighting games very difficult to not only learn, but to practice and get better at. This also begs the question, are fighting games too hard? The simple answer is no, because anyone can pick up a controller and eventually learn how to do some stuff in a game, even if it's not at the level of Justin Wong or Taquito. However, they are challenging, especially for those that don't know the lingo and haven't had a person to really rope them in. Again, some people don't want beginners in the game or discourage them by bullying them either in-game or on their videos if they post them. This does affect the community and shapes the difficulty slope to get into this genre. A way to simplify this for yourself is to set a goal with what you are trying to achieve. Big combos? Learn the ins and outs of doing them. Good spacing? Learn what good spacing looks like and how it's done. Want to be high rank? Learn how to optimize your character. A big misconception is that you have to play a certain way. While a lot of players who use the same character play similarly, that is partially due to select higher level players being regarded as the best, so people learn from them, integrating their style into their own gameplay as they learn. So how does this tie into accessibility, since this is what this series is about? I will repeat that the developers have started moving in this direction, though there are always improvements to be made. I will also repeat that the community needs to be more open to these beginners. How, then, do we accept newcomers and teach them what's important in an easy-to-understand way? I believe it starts with content creators. There are still a lot of content creators that post gameplay without really showing what they're doing and/or explaining why. This is a pretty old trope in gaming, since learning wasn't always done by the internet. People learned through plugging away at a game until they found new things to use. This means that people would have learned from playing with friends at arcades or trying to win local tournaments for either money or bragging rights. Content creators, though, have now become a #1 source for teaching games, and even gameplay can be useful if a beginner knows what they're looking to find. Especially considering a lot of people's reliance on these creators, I think giving more explanations during gameplay is what we can do to improve too. An important skill I learned to pick up from content creators was when they talked about making reads and using knowledge checks. If an opponent doesn't know how to handle a situation, do your best to place them in that situation as often as you can. If you don't know how to handle a situation, make a mental note to learn more about it and try to avoid it in the matches you play. Learning how to avoid a situation is just as important as how to get out of it when you're in it. Content creators are also the most influential to community opinions. While a lot of creators try to bring a sense of integrity and thoughtfulness, just as many, and usually bigger ones, tend to try and drag any player, community, or game for something that is inconveniencing them. This behavior incentivizes not letting a mistake be a learning experience, and it becomes an external expression of frustration, a habit that I have also gotten into. The cultivation of better communities should start from these content creators, which will then influence their audience, which will then influence a greater part of the community. This leads me then to the audiences of these creators and streamers. Something that is often talked about in communication courses in my college is the art of being a proactive consumer. This is especially important in an age where everything is digital and each consumer is seeking out their own forms of entertainment. There is a phenomenon called the attention economy, which is the business model of social media, where the more you come back and stay on a media website, the more attention you give it, and then the more data they can sell and make money from. And that means when someone likes a creator, the more likely they are to repeat that creator's ideas and cement it into their community because of how many times they've heard it. The point I'm trying to make is that a great deal of consumers either don't know or don't want to actively try and correct a community's opinion. The invitation of belonging somewhere typically means agreeing with what the larger portion of players agree with. Therefore, if the biggest names in the community are ranting about every small detail of that game, that will influence their audience, meaning that a large portion will then spread it to their fellow players. That will spill onto new members, making them feel bad for being a part of that community or making negativity their priority. A lot of this negativity spills then onto the devs, who sometimes get angry messages and harmful other interactions such as doxing and death threats. While most people don't go that far, the fact is there is little to no punishment for this behavior, and that means many people brush it off as, well, that's gaming. A lot of people, including myself, don't truly understand the pressure devs are already under from studios and publishers to produce, and for them to get threats and hate for something as insignificant as game balance is an awful look from the outside in. I understand that bad balance threatens competitive integrity, but for the average player, most of us don't lose because Zangief's throw damage is so high. It's due to a lack of knowledge and technique. With that said, the community is still obsessed with game balance because of those content creators. I want to remind you that most content creators are quite stressed because they aren't necessarily living off of streaming. A good portion of us don't even make content for money, and we spend a lot of time and effort making something only 100 or so people will watch. Those that make it decently big are still making more money from sponsorships rather than from the content they actually create and are truly passionate about. The insanely big streamers such as Ninja, XQC, Shroud, and Pokimane all made it massively famous, and no matter your opinions of them, they are the very lucky few whose content makes them a ton of money and the sponsorships add more onto it. So, what can we do to be better consumers? For starters, not supporting creators whose content aims to shame other people for being bad at a game. I understand that there is the nagging urge to feel better at something than someone else, but it's not fair to them. They're trying just as much as you are. While I still get frustrated at Tekken and Street Fighter, it doesn't feel like I'm getting mad at other people as much as being frustrated with myself for not knowing something, which is a debilitating feeling for me. Following more positive creators would be a start, though the way YouTube, Twitch, and other social media throws money-making creators at you, some digging will be necessary to find them. I will be honest, I don't really watch many streams of Tekken and almost none for Street Fighter except for major tournaments, which I can watch later as a VOD most of the time. That's helped me shake some toxic behaviors, though some are persisting from external real-life issues that I'm still working on. Another thing we can do as consumers is to really start trying to compliment smaller creators. I'm not saying so to fish for compliments in my own comments, but as a smaller creator, I speak for a lot of us by saying we enjoy seeing nice comments, especially when most videos don't even get any comment at all. It feels so pointless posting videos when every fourth one is marked by an insulting comment. It takes the wind out of our sails, even though it is expected from our platform, especially with gaming. Consumers also could be more willing to do research on creators and interact with a wider variety of them. One of the few I have the time and patience to watch is Pirate Software, a game developer who streams games I've never heard of, but is quite smart and uses his wisdom to inform his audience while still cracking jokes and making positive content. Also, he rescues ferrets, so that's pretty cool. As far as research goes, there are some creators I used to follow that I wish I never had, because of things I disagree with that they've done or said. And while they don't care about me or any other one person leaving because of that, if more consumers searched a bit into them before really committing money and time to them, they could lose a lot more followers than just that one. Again, I won't name names in a negative light because that's not what I'm trying to spread here. I just believe that if more people looked into the creators before following everything they say, more people would find smaller creators specifically tailored to their enjoyment. However, consumers and creators alike need to be kinder to those that are running the game. This goes back to my point earlier that balance and competitive integrity doesn't affect the whole community, and only the smallest fraction of players is truly affected by small tweaks in balance, frame data, and intangible details that most people aren't prone to noticing. My evidence for this is that when Heihachi Mishima released at the beginning of October, and the entire community claimed he was overpowered and his combo damage was too high and needs nerfs. This harkens back to the second video in this series where Jake mentioned the difference between learning how to do the big combo versus when to do the big combo. Heihachi struggles in nearly every other aspect of the game, whether it be his moves tracking, his frame data, or his general lack of capable neutral moves in a game where if you're not interacting in neutral, you're already 50% on your way to losing. For Street Fighter VI, many people during year one believed that DJ was insanely overtuned. As someone who doesn't pick a character based on their tier but also loves big combo damage, I chose to see if he felt like cheap wins, and I do not believe that is the case. While yes, his optimized max damage combo was about 70% of the health bar if I remember, it still takes a lot of precise inputs, including what I believe to be one of the hardest inputs in the game. Even the Shoryuken into level 3, which ailed me for the longest time, was not as difficult to learn as that one was. My point is that big damage combos don't necessarily make a beginner-friendly character, because Heihachi and DJ both require good execution to get their best combos, and that's not something you can just pick up and do. I've been playing Mishima's on and off for almost 2 years, and I'm still not really able to play Heihachi because of everything else in his move list being a pain to work with. The communities should take a longer look at how a character performs, rather than only watching Fudo play DJ or Ni play Brian before they're saying that they're overpowered and needing nerfs. So, what do I believe is actually important to a beginner learning a fighting game? What can the community help within itself to truly let them in? Talk even more about fundamentals, spacing, neutral, pokes, punishes, and everything else that makes fighting games a true mind game rather than just paying money to press buttons. Not that there's anything wrong with mashing buttons to lose and learn to someone who can defend that, but being more forthcoming about those things rather than promoting massive damage combos all of the time. Sure, those are good to see from time to time, but they don't really help someone learn the game. In fact, it seems to do quite the opposite for people like me. When I first started learning fighting games, I believed the same thing a lot of people believe. Big combo equals win. For almost a year, I believed this. And after that, I began to realize I'd capped my skill by learning those instead of fundamentals. It's become something I've been disheartened by recently because I feel I haven't practiced enough fundamentals and can't proceed to the next level of play. And that's just it. It's a truth that haunts me that I've never been able to admit out loud. The fundamentals are even more important now that the fighting game landscape is ever changing. And I'm making this video to help encourage the community to be more positive, but also to remind myself that I too was a beginner once, and that even after 1,000 some hours of playing fighting games, I'm still relatively fresh to the genre in a way that seems unfathomable. To really encapsulate this point, I'll leave you with a quote I heard recently from a former professional Team Fortress 2 player that made me realize the piece I was missing so that you can face this truth before it haunts you like it's haunted me. You have to practice the boring stuff to get better.